Hello and welcome to day 25 of this Unity game development journal. So this is week 4, and throughout week 4 I'm working on how I can improve the map code to service designing a map, bringing into the code, and having a full data model of the map, all the map information, including where game objects will be spawned, the actual sprite tiles that are going to be put onto the map for the image, for the visuals, as well as pathfinding for the AI. So all that stuff has to be dealt with in some sort of a map implementation, which my current implementation wasn't solving, so I decided to roll out my own. So this is sort of this week of experimenting. So last week we had this 8x8 tile map that I put onto the screen, got the sprites all to work perfectly, and the problem was I was accessing each sprite by its name because I only had 4 sprites, so it was easy. But in the tile program, you can see I have a sprite sheet here that's just massive, right? And now I'm moving up to a 50 by 50 map using a few different kinds, and I don't want to go through and test every ID and say, is this a earth? Is it a grass? Is it a path? Is it sand? You know, that would just take forever because there's hundreds of different sprites here. Now this isn't the final sprites, but you can imagine the final sheet I'll have for this game will be very, very big, right? All the different possibilities, and that would be terrible to do doing an if statement or a switch statement. So the better way of doing it is using the tile ID and loading in all of this sprite, this tile set here, having it subdivided into all the different 32 by 32 little sprites, and each one of those sprites would have an ID in the position, just the same way that the tile program does. It splits this up into different sprites here and gives each one an ID, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through. So I want my program to do the exact same thing, then I can match the two at the end. So that's what I worked on today, and I got it to work. I got this big map showing up now very easily. So essentially what happens is you come in here and the world controller is going to ask for a tile sheet file. So this tile set I have here, which I just brought in, called it a multiple sprite sheet instead of just a single sprite. And that divides it out into 32 by 32 little images here, the little sprites. So when I tell the world controller that this is the tile set we're using, I can go into the code, world controller. So here is the tile set file right here. And what my job here is to map all these little sprites over to a sprite array. And I call that the tile set sprites. This is how I do that. I come down here and I go resources, load all, and map that to a sprite. And then I just give it a path. And the path is the resources folder from here. Then I go into the tile set folder and then the tile sheet file, which I put onto the controller there in the inspector, and just access the name of it. So that's smart enough to go and grab it, and it splits it into different sprites and puts it into this tile set sprites array. So perfect, now I can use that. So down here I have a on tile type changed. So when I'm generating the map, like we did yesterday, it calls this on tile changed every time the tile ID changes, or the sprite ID changes. So when that sprite ID changes, I come down here and I say the tile game object, get the sprite renderer sprite field, and assign to it this new sprites array that I created just a few minutes ago. So this tile set sprites, and I pass it the sprite ID. And that's a direct mapping to how tiled splits it to how Unity splits it, just by assigning in a sequence 0, 1, 2, 3 IDs for all the different sprites. So perfect, everything matches up. And instead of doing the if or check statement that we had before, even though we only had 4 tiles, that's 4 different if statements, I broke all that down into hundreds and hundreds of tiles down to essentially one line of code. This is essentially just checking to make sure that it's within range. So it's just a safety thing. But really this one line of code does all of the assigning of the sprites to the sprite ID. Perfect, really, really clean. If none of this works, then I do have an error down here saying unrecognized tile type, which is doesn't really happen too often. It shouldn't happen if everything's set up right, but you never know, someone might put in the wrong file or something, so that's there for checking that. Okay, so let's go through and see. One other thing I did at the very end is getting ready for tomorrow. My next step is to create a layer in tiled for characters, and I just sort of placed a character here these are just markers. So they're not really doing anything. I just have like a little marker here on this layer. So if you look, it's on a totally separate layer. I'm just going to put these all over to say where I want to place characters in the game, and each one will be a separate tile ID that I can then associate with an actual character prefab. That's my goal for tomorrow, is to do character prefabs, map that over to a tile ID, and then on my tile sheet here I can simply have um, some tiles just labeled with the different characters that I can just stick on here, and then when we go and generate the world, it just puts a character there. So I actually have that working, not the final way with the prefabs, but just having it so it forces the character into this tile position by manually setting everything. So there you go. That's sort of going to be tomorrow's, but I did start that. So let's show you what it looks like. I'm going to run play here, go into the console. Okay, so we have nothing really here. Let's see if I can make this a bit bigger for you. Hit game. So here's the big map. It's just the sprites right now. There's no, I can't walk off the map because of the way I have the boundary set up. You know, there's this no collision, but it's still, it knows when to stop the character, which is awesome. And that's from I think 3 days ago we set that up. So, but yeah, I don't have any collisions because my goal is to have another layer for just collisions or game objects that have colliders in them, and then it'll be spawned at that point. So there's going to be one layer for just visuals, another layer for all character positions and items, and then a third layer that says all of the collisions for this world. And though this is sort of how the whole scene is going to be built off of these three comma separated files, which I think is pretty cool because then we can customize within the resource folder all the worlds, and the game just runs. It just knows what to do with it. So here's this character that sort of got spawned automatically. Um, there's no colliders or anything. All it is a sprite this time, but it goes to show that I can set this up in the tiled program, designing my level, and it'll actually go through that comma separated list and put characters where I want them. So let's go through here and see. I can come up here. It's running at about 50 frames per second. As you can see, the batches is down to 2, which is amazing. It's only doing 2 drop batches at a time, which is awesome. For some reason, a few days ago, it had like 17 batches. Something was going on that I'm not too sure, but from cleaning up the code and things, I've got it down to 2 or 3. I think I've just seen 3 there. It may have something to do with the different types. Yeah, see, there's 3. Oh, it's because the character's in the scene there. So when I leave, okay, there, that's why. The character was there, so there's drawing 3 things. The character, the NPC, the character, and then the tile sheet. So cool. Let's go to here and just test this in tiled. Where should we test it? Yeah, we'll throw another character here. Let's throw a character right there. Alright, so I'm going to show you the whole process here. I'll just save it. I'll just export as. This is going to be a CSV file. Now eventually I'm going to have this go into the so let's see here. Just going to double check to make sure it did. Okay, so there's a 0 there and a 0 there. Perfect. So there's 2 now. So I'll just drag this over into the characters. Eventually I'll have it just automatically go into the game file, but for now this will be fine. So I'm wondering if it automatically updated in here perfectly fine, or if that screwed something up. So I have the CSVs, I have the character one there, and do I have 2 zeros? I see 1 0, 2 zeros. Okay, perfect. So let's just run the game and see if it just added 2 characters. So we'll run here, and if you remember where we put those characters, there's one up the path and one over here. So there's the second one we just added, there's the 2. That's how simple it is. You just sort of stick a tile on the map, designing your world, hit save, and essentially the save or export, and the export should go right into your game folder, the resources folder. And then you just run your game and you got an extra character right where you want it. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to end the video here. Made huge progress on developing out much bigger maps, much more complicated maps. The next step obviously is doing the colliders and prefabs for objects to bring us sort of back to where we started with the old way of doing this. And once the colliders and prefabs are in place, then the the pathfinding will work again, because right now the pathfinding works, but there's no colliders to test it off of. I sort of got rid of all the colliders. So yeah, once I get the collider layer in there, that'll spawn all these colliders, and the pathfinding will work perfectly, hopefully. So that's the next step to getting these larger maps working. So thanks for watching, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.